4 years ago, my family decided to move from one part of the Dallas area to another, and we needed to find a place that we could live in and I could work. And we found a pretty common setup in the homes that we were looking at was an entryway, and off to one side there would be a living room, a second living room, or a dining room, or a sitting room, or whatever you want to call it, and then bedrooms on the other side of the hall. And so we found this house, and initially there was no wall separating the hallway from the studio that I'm in now. So we put that wall in. It's a staggered stud situation for soundproof purposes, and it works fairly well, although we used a exterior door that has glass panels, which is definitely the weakest link. It's not a huge deal because my family is usually gone when I'm working, unless of course it's a worldwide pandemic. Even then it's not that big of a deal. If I hear them screaming or they hear me screaming, it's all good. In my 2 decades of doing this, I've built a handful of studios on the cheap, low budget, and so I have some experience with basic acoustic treatments. I know enough to do the basic amount. I treated the front side of this room as heavily as I possibly could. The room is only 9 foot wide, 20 foot deep. So there are some limitations just with the physics of sound, especially the low end. There's not a ton I could do, but I did my best. I treated the side walls with absorption panels. They're 1x4 wood frame with insulation, rigid insulation, wrapped in a loosely woven fabric so that sound can get through, the high frequencies can get through to the absorption, and they're not reflected back the way they would be with fabric that was tightly woven. The back corners, I built these bass traps, and they're quite deep, and I did that because I had the space in that corner of the room, and I read the consensus was that if it was more than 16 feet deep, I could use the standard fluffy insulation, and it would have the same effect as the thicker stuff in a smaller setup. Now, could be totally wrong. Everybody has a different opinion on these things, but I went with that, found some nice fabric that works, and I'm happy. The room is very dead. All the things I read said in a smaller room, you pretty much have to treat every surface. So I've done that except for the floor, which is a hard wood floor. I am very proud of what is above me. I have these, they're not diffusers, there's something else. They're like honeycomb shaped, and I put insulation above it, and it's supposed to help give a wider dispersion, like a diffuser, but it's different. I don't know, look it up. A buddy of mine gave them to me because they were damaged, so I put them in this frame and made a place where I could put my lights, and I'm very proud of it. They're on a dimmer switch. Sometimes I have to turn the dimmer off if there's issues with hum, but most of the time it works just fine and lights up my desk the way I need it to be lit. I don't need a ton of light. I like to work almost in the dark, and it really annoys my wife, but that's just how I like to work. The rest of the cloud above me was from my old studio. It had some lights that was actually above my desk, and I repurposed it, and it works great because it lights up that side of the room, the synthesizers and guitars. I would say my favorite part of the studio is the desk that I built. I was going to pay a lot of money. Actually, I never was going to pay a lot of money for a built-in keyboard desk like this, so I built it myself. I used way too much red oak from Lowe's. I probably should have used some cheap plywood and veneer, but I don't know how to do that. I know how to make square cuts, and I stained it, and I'm very happy with it. It fits me. It's made to fit my height and build, and yeah, it's my favorite thing in here. For a computer, I am using an old Mac Mini 2018 with an external GPU. I spend my time recording music, making music, using plugins and large sample libraries, and it handles that quite well. I also do a lot of video production like this, and so I thought I would go with the Mac Mini and then add the external GPU. It's an RX 580. It's not an incredible one. Would I do it again? No. First off, no one's buying Mac Mini 2018s anymore. They're buying the new ones, and those are much better from what I hear. But for the hybrid person, someone who likes to do color grading, color correcting in 4K or even higher, this has not been the best option. It loses connection often. I have issues when I'm exporting, and it could all be myself, but I've found that I don't really care for this separate setup. I would have gone with the iMac, but I wanted to have a larger screen, so I'm holding out hope for the iMac 2021, if that is such a thing, and that's probably what I will get to replace what I have now. For monitors, I use Focal Twins. I bought them for my much larger space. Would I have bought them for this smaller space? Probably not. I might have bought something smaller, but they sound good. I haven't spent a lot of time listening to other monitors, especially high-end monitors, and so I'm sure I'm missing some things, but in this smaller room, I don't know if I can really trust them, even though I use SonarWorks in my monitoring chain, and that helps. I trust my Sennheiser headphones more than I do these when it comes to critical mixing, and I know that is also an area where a lot of people disagree and say you shouldn't trust headphones for that. But if you like the way my music sounds, just know that I set up my mixes and wrote them listening to these speakers in the room, but most likely I finished off the mixes with my Sennheisers. The keyboard in the desk is an old Studio Logic keyboard. It's very old. I bought the keyboard on eBay. It was almost falling apart, but I ripped the keybed out, put it in, and it works great except for the keys that I spilled a drink on that don't work, that I need to fix. And I've been saying that in videos for the past year. I use my Arturia keystep for most things that don't require two hands. It's great. I love the arpeggiator. It's just nice and handy. I do have this Novation Peak on my desk, which looks really cool. And I love the Novation Peak. I don't use it as much as I would like, primarily because I make theme-based albums. If I don't work on a synthesizer album for a long period of time, I don't use it as much as I'd like. But I'm hoping to remedy that in the future. If you only want one really good quality synth, I think it's the way to go. Even though it's digital, it sounds great. So who cares if digital versus analog? I know people care. But for me, it's not that big of a deal. But I like the hands-on nature of being outside of the box. For my headphone monitoring, I use this old StudioCom Studio Technologies, which actually belongs to my friend Brad Knight. He brought it over here years ago. And Brad, if you're watching this, I need to give it back to you because I kept thinking I was going to buy something else and I never did, or I just need to buy it from you. But yeah, give me a call, Brad. We can talk about that. My monitor is an LG curved. I really like it. And I hope that the new iMac is nice and wide and maybe curved. Probably not. There's something about it I like, and I'm not all that eager to give it up. I do have a TV, which I mostly watch television on. It's about to fall off because I stripped one of the screws and it's just sort of hanging there. Would I put a TV up there again? No, probably not. I can watch TV on this big monitor in the corner if that's something that I really want, now that I'm using a streaming cable service like most of us. I guess it's not cable, is it? Whatever. In my main rack here, I have this Headphone Amp made by Little Labs. I have not compared headphone amps. Little Labs is a reputable company. I read good reviews. I needed a good headphone amp. I wanted to be able to trust my headphones as best I could, get the best sound, so I went with it, and it's been great. My Rascal Audio 2R, built by my friend Joel Cameron, who's a gear designer, are the preamps that I use on most everything. Just a nice, good, all-around, warm, thick sound. An 8-channel API style preamp that I built with the help of my friend Joel. I use that often, especially when I'm, putting multiple mics on something or I'm recording drums. Below that is an old PreSonus preamp that I'm only using for a talkback mic when I am recording drums or people out in the foyer or in my drum room, which I'm not going to show you because it's a dump right now, and it's where I hide everything that actually was in here before I started filming this video, and I just shoved it in there. So that'll be a different video. I'm still running a UAD Apollo Firewire interface that's going to a converter into Thunderbolt into my Mac Mini. It's still holding on. The converters sound good to me. I'm sure at some point I will have to upgrade, but I'm going to stay with that as long as I possibly can. All my preamps and compressors are running through this TT patch bay. On the other side of my rack, I have a homemade DIY Pultec style EQ that I often use. It was built by my friend Joel. And then I have this DIY 1176 that I started and my friend Joel finished. You see a pattern here. And below that is this Ashley compressor, which I haven't used in a long time. And even my poor DBX 160s, which are great, but I don't use them as often as I once did. I'm guilty of using the plugins in the UAD console a lot. They sound good. It's quick. There's a lot of options. I simply don't use as much outboard gear as I once did. And I certainly don't use outboard gear during the mix process because I just don't have the time to do that, to print mixes, especially when I'm printing tons and tons of alternate mixes and stems. This spot of the room is what I hate the most. All the cables come in here. I've got this Snake Patch Bay XLR system from the sends that are coming in from the other room, which I ran through the wall, and it looks awful. I should never have run it through the wall when I built the wall that way. I should just run a channel outside the wall. So don't do what I did there. And I hope to clean that up one day, but I don't know. That's part of the reason why I was delaying making this video. The rack beside me, I featured that in a previous video. That's my new effects rack. It allows me to plug my guitar in, to go through the Kemper, or I can use all the different synthesizers. So I won't go into great detail onto what I have here, but you can definitely go watch that video and get an idea of how I went about routing it and how I use it. The Korg was one of my first outboard synths. I love it. I use it all the time. It's gritty. And the Roland Boutique series, the JU06, I use that often as well. I have an Akai keyboard set up over here if I want to play some parts when I'm not at my desk. And quite a few of my MIDI instruments are going through this iConnect MIDI interface. Some of my MIDI interfaces are going direct USB into the computer. Others go into that, which give me some more flexibility. It's been years since I opened up the software and I couldn't tell you how things are routed, but there was a time when I wanted to be able to play my synthesizers without having to turn on the computer, and that's not really the way I work anymore, but it's helpful in that respect. All of the synths go through this Ashley line mixer and then eventually make their way back into Pro Tools. Below that is my unused Rascal audio tone bus, built by Joel. It was a way to add thickness and warmth to my mixes when I was using outboard gear, but like I mentioned earlier, I just can't do that anymore. I don't have the time to make that work. Coming out of my monitor distribution system, one of the outputs is going to this headphone amp, which is proved to be very handy for me. When I'm recording in the back of the room, I can plug my headphones in and have some basic volume control, but it's also helpful for clients. I have some headphone extensions and they can take that and sit anywhere they want and they can control their volume and I don't have to do it for them. Patch bay, again, watch the other video. You can see how I route everything in this rack. I just got my Roland Chorus Echo back, which I'm very excited. I had it serviced and it's really nice having that back. I hope to implement that more in the future. These pull-out drawers are fantastic. I've got them labeled for guitar-related equipment, but also screwdrivers and all the junk. And I'm trying my best to keep that organized. I even put labels. So we'll check back in a couple months and see if I'm keeping up with that. At the bottom of the rack, I have my input cables, so I can just tuck them down there, pull them out when I want to play guitar. And I've got this expression pedal that's going into the back of the Kemper. I also have some books down here that I've read a handful of pages in each one. Oh, and let's not forget the reamp that I put together in a previous video and still have not plugged in. For the longest time, I would store cables and tambourines and headphones in the other room, but I found that going back and forth was a pain and I'm lazy. So I finally broke down and built this pegboard where I can store the tambourines, the headphone extensions, drumsticks. What else we got? My Fisher-Price tape recorder and shakers and just random things that I need access to, but I don't want to put them in a drawer or have to walk across the hall. Below that is where I keep my guitars that I use often. I found that it's not the best to have them out all the time for a handful of reasons. They get dusty and they resonate when I play the music real loud and I can hear it. That's why I moved it behind me a ways. But I like having access to my guitars when I need them. I've got my classical, a couple of electrics. One was built by a friend's friend called the Antiquarian. I use it on one of my sounds, the Antiquarian Echo. A Highway 1 Telly. I have a relatively new precision bass and my old jazz bass that I bought from a friend who was touring and he went to be a doctor, so he sold it to me. But it's I have no idea what it is. The body and neck are from different years. I think the neck is from 1978 and it's got these Bartolini, am I saying that right? Pickups. And has this deep, long sustain, and it works great for a lot of things, but it's different than the P bass for sure, so it's nice having those two options. Back in the corner, I have an amp that I built years ago. I called it the Church Mouse because I needed a quiet amp to play in churches, and I brought it in the studio recently because I wanted to play my new lap steel, which I am eventually going to put these benders on it, which I'm very excited about. Hopefully that will be one of my next videos so I can begin the journey to be a great old man steel guitar player. That's what I want. There's a student violin in the back corner that was given to me that's terrible and it probably needs to go, but it's just there now. On the back wall, I have my Kawai BS30 LE, which is a great piano. I found it used at a local piano dealer. I took all the covers off so I could put mics close, which is a bit of a pain, I believe right now. Yeah, you can see right now, I often have to cover up the strings as best I can because it resonates very loud, especially when I'm doing my talking head videos. You can hear it resonating with my voice. Hanging above the piano, I have a couple other guitars. Baby Taylor, which I usually keep high strung in Nashville tuning for that really nice light sound. And then I have this Gretsch guitar that was given to me by a buddy that I keep usually in DADGAD. So I have a couple different options if I want to get going quickly. What else? I've got my Cajon here that basically blocks the view behind the desk because it doesn't look very good. I do have my backpack, which I'm very proud of. I'll tell you the story. It was a very expensive backpack. Peak Design makes it. But one day I was flying home before the pandemic and they asked me if I wanted to take a later flight. I had the option of getting a gift card or whatever, but it was for $700. So I didn't spend $700 on the backpack, but I did splurge and get a backpack that I absolutely love. And maybe one day I'll talk about the camera gear that I usually keep in that. In my studio now, you'll also find lights. I've been doing quite a bit more video work and I have to light up my face. And right now I am lighting up my face using an Aperture LED. I forget which model it is. I'll try to find that. But it works great for lighting up my face when I'm sitting at my desk where I am right now. I also turn this big screen on text edit and I turn the brightness up and I make it full screen, and that helps add a little more light to my face. Basically the goal here is that my face is slightly brighter than what's behind me and I get enough light that I don't have to boost my ISO settings. ISO? I'm a musician, so I don't have to get that right. Basically that's your artificial light enhancement. Totally butchering that as well. It works pretty good. I also have a light that I keep in the back usually with this softbox. It's a Godox or Godot or however you say it. Godox, if I understand correctly, is somewhat of a competitor of Aperture, which Aperture is the first inexpensive light company. Still expensive, but they make really high quality lights that are available for people like us to buy. And Godox is even cheaper than that. I just got the VL300 on Black Friday. That was a good deal. It's really powerful. I had the 150, I believe is what it was. I forget the numbers. And it worked great, but it was noisy. And when you get closer to a microphone, we don't want too much noise. So I bought that so I would have a second light as I do more video related. Basically, the more light you can get, the more powerful light, the more you can diffuse it, and the softer you can make it on a subject's face or in the room. So oftentimes when I'm making my videos, I'll just shoot that into the back of the room out of the frame so it lights up the space behind me if I don't want it to be too dark. By the way, here's what it looks like when I turn the Aperture light off. Here's what it looks like when I turn the Aperture light off and then close down text edit. So that's quite a bit different. And with text edit back on. If you want to buy a light and you want to buy a monitor, you just buy a really big bright monitor and that might be enough to help light up your face. The chair in my studio is from my grandmother's storage building that I found years ago and I love it. And it's one of my favorite things in this room. What am I missing? I've got just a pair of headphones, a couple pair of headphones that I use. I like the Audio Technicas that I use when I'm recording because my Sennheisers are open backed. Those are closed back and they're comfortable. Wear them for a long period of time. They get loud, but they don't bleed out into the microphone. And you'll see behind me, I always have my U47 clone built by my friend Joe Cameron at the ready on a stand. That's my main go-to mic when I'm recording quickly. I have other mics which I'll use for other things and often will bring them in when I'm recording acoustic guitars or piano or whatever. But if I just need one mic set up all the time, that's it because it sounds good on almost everything. The newest addition back here is my sign that my brother-in-law made. He took my logo and it's got this LED light that I can turn on and off by turning it. It's super cool and it's lighting up the face of my bobblehead that is me. I think that just about covers it. I have more gear in my other room, but most of the stuff in here is what I use on a day-to-day basis. I didn't talk at all about software that I use. That could be another video, but this is all stuff I've accumulated over the course of 20 years. One of the reasons why I hesitate making a video like this is I don't want people to think that you've got to have all this to make music. Some people will think I don't have enough stuff, but most of you, if you're just getting started, you don't have this. But I've strategically bought equipment over the past 20 years when I needed it without going into a lot of debt. And nowadays, so much can be done simply inside the computer. So I just want to encourage you to think about the way that you spend your money. Don't go crazy. Buy what you need. Start with a decent microphone. Spend a couple $100, a basic interface. Get a good pair of headphones that'll last you for a while, that you can grow with, and then start adding in some of the extra things. But along the way, I'm proud of the customization that I've done and the skills that I've learned to make it work for this space that I'm in. If I was in a different space, I would make it work for that space. And to me, that's fun. I like the fact that I can sit in here on a desk that I made, an acoustic treatment that I put into place, and I did it all to take advantage of what I had. And so that's what I want you to get from this, is that, yeah, gear is good, but the way that we implement it and the way we make it work for our needs is what really matters. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments. If you have suggestions for me, maybe you see something that I've done and you think I've done it completely wrong and you have some advice for me, be nice, and I'll see about implementing that if I think it's a good idea. That's all I got. I'll see you next week. Take care.